Welcome back to Programming with Qt Widgets. In this episode, we'll attack two things, namely, how do you create strings that are concatenation of different pieces of information, and how do you handle plural versus singular versions of your strings. I'm sure if you are not native English or from that matter Danish speaking or a few others, you'll be saying, well, wait, Jesper, it's not just about singular and plural. No, it's not. There are many different cases in some languages. And we'll get back to that in just a second. But let's start with the first version. Try and translate this string here. English, press the big red button. Italian, and no, I don't speak Italian, but premi, that means press. Il, the. See, I'm good at Spanish, huh? Grande. I've been too much to Starbucks, so I know grande, that's big. And then rosso, I can see that because it's in red here and, well, but button has sneaked its way in between grande and rosso. So how do you do that? You cannot just take the string, press the, and then plus, and then whatever size you have in your C++ source code, plus whatever color, plus the string button, and ask your translators to translate that, because then they can't get the button in between. The solution is to use, comes here, tr, and then these placeholders, %1, %2, I believe you can do up to %99. I never tried it, but hey, feel free to add a comment below if you tried. And then .arc. And here, the first one will go in the place of %1, the second in the place of %2. And what is the outcome of tr here? Well, tr is just a simple function in QObject that returns, wait for it, a QString. So it's just QString.arc. And let me just give you a word of warning, because there's a lot of debate among me and other people in KDAB going forth and back. I did put this one up front here because they'll say, well, there is a version that is .arc with just a single argument, and that one is overloaded to a lot of different things. And for example, integer or long or, well, QString obviously. But if you call .arc size, parenthesis close, .arc color, then there is a risk that someday you'll have a QString here, and that QString will have a %1 in it, for example. And well, it's not going to be a problem here because we only have two of these. But if it had a %1 and there was a %3 here, then that would be put into the position of the %1. And maybe, well, you get my idea. The point is that the tr is a QString. .arc returns another QString, and then you .arc again. And there is this problem with that. But there is, in my world, I've seen it many, many times happen to people, another problem in the version up here, namely size and color. If they were not QStrings, but they were integers, like here, I have from and to, and then I call .arc with this. No, I'm not going to get from in on %1 and to in on %2. And let me just go over here, see if I can find there we are, and find QString documentation. And if we go down here, you can see there's a lot of overloaded of .arc. But the one with two integers is likely going to be this one here that it hits. Int a, so the string that we had over here, or this number here, blah, 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 will be put into the position of %1. But this huge number here, which I thought would be what would go into %2, actually will go into the field width. And the field width, that is how much padding should happen, or how wide should this be. So what I'll end up with this version down here is a string that is That is 1,234,568 characters long, which is likely not what I expected. So therefore I say, unless you are very, very sure that you only have strings, use this version. Otherwise, use the.arg, whatever. But as I said, it is really something up for debate. I know several people in KDAB that would pour bad things in my drink if they heard me give that advice out. So now you at least know of the danger. What there is much less debate about in KDAB is whether this is a good user interface or not. Loaded one files, that's just... Okay, I admit I've done it. I am doing it still, but there are a relatively easy way to avoid that. And it goes like this. In your, and I'll get back to that table in just a second. In your file, you write something like %n. And be aware, this is not %1, %2, or %. It is a literal n, as in November. So %n. And then the translator will be offered to translate this file depending on the count. So they will be offered to translate it for 0, for 1, for whatever. And that's what gets us to this table over here that comes from this documentation down here. I really love this one because this, and it's only just showing you some of the setup. So in English, which you hopefully know, otherwise, well, I would be speaking really weird on this. Well, ChatGPT, whatever. Anyway, in English, rule number 1 is n equal to 1. Loaded 1 file, otherwise loaded 2 files, or loaded 0 files. So see, 0 is over here too. In French, I'm not even going to try, but 0 and 1 actually sound the same. So they don't have the plural version. And look at this table down here. I love the Polish one. Do you know the game, the child game Fubar? It goes like this. You get a bunch of kids sitting in a circle and they'll just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if they get to something that is divisible by 3, they'll say foo. If it's divisible by 5, they'll say bar. And if it's divisible by both, they'll say foo bar. And whoever gets it wrong first will fail the game. And that seems a bit like what they are playing to here in Poland. No, I'm not making fun of the Polish people. I'm sure there's languages that are even worse. So here is a salute to the people in Japan who just have the same way for everything. But as I said, see, here's 3 rules for some of them, and some there's only just 1 rule. But what you do in your writing software, instead of writing loaded %n files, well, you will write loaded %n files, and that is what will show up in your user interface unless you actually translate from English to English, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. But you'll do that, and then the count here, and the translator in Japanese will just get that option of translating loaded 1 files to Japanese. The Polish people will be asked to translate it in 3 different versions, and I'll show you in Linguist what it looks like just a second. And then we have this one here. That is the disambiguation. So it's a sharp pointer that you have here. That is if this text here could appear in different places in your application and mean different things, then you can have this. But I'll talk about that in the next episode. When you were a kid, you were afraid of monsters underneath the bed, right? Well, now that you're grown up, the monster has become the heap running out of memory. Fortunately, Million Wolf from KDAB has created a tool to identify these problems. Download heaptrack today. I said that you need to translate from English to English, and that just sounds like really weird. Well, there could be 2 reasons for that. First of all, it might be that those people that actually know English, that they don't want to go and edit your source code. So has and have, which I sometimes have a problem with. I should have said which I sometimes has problem with. They might not want to fix that in your source code, but in a translation step. But that is the odd case. The real case is for how do you actually do this when you have you need to write something like this in your C++ code, but how do you get that narrowed down to loaded one file or loaded, got a lot of files. There's an S too much. Never mind, Jesper. The key thing is that you'll have a translation from English to English. And to avoid that you're sitting there with 500,000 strings or however many strings there is in your gigantic application to be translated just to spot those of this, there is actually an argument for L update, which you in your CMake can specify like this. So we saw this in the previous episode, that you have these TS files and a bunch of those, and then you have this plural _TS_ file, plural handling for English TS. And that's the one, plural handling, that's just the name of the target here, _en. That is if you load a translation for English, this one will be loaded, but it will only have those few strings that needs plural handling. And let me get over to the source code now and show you all this in action. Obviously, we set up everything in CMake as we saw in the previous slides. And what I'm just looking at here is the Linguist usage for Italian here. So you can see loaded the red big button, whatever. It requires the translation here. And here I can now put the %1 and %2 wherever I want. Similarly, the loaded in files. Okay, so this is what it says, loaded one file in Italian, and this is loaded 2033. It's the plural case that I have here. Similar, let's see the English version. The English version, see, it's much simpler because it only have the %n cases in here. And now I can say loaded one file and loaded n files in here. That's simple, eh? All you need to do is to avoid concatenating strings, and you have to put in %n for those cases where it is 1 or 2 or 0, whatever. It gets worse, but I don't have a solution to you at this place. See, I have this. There have been 99 balloons flying in the last 3 days, or there has been one balloon flying the last day. How do I translate these two options to German? 99 balloons. 99 Luftballon. Yeah, that was a challenge. And now I've been singing it. Get me that beer. Anyway, see, in den and im and sind and ist, and there is no such syntax. It would have been cool if it would have been possible to write something like there have been %n1 balloons flying in the last %n2, so specifying the 1 and 2, but that is not a possibility. And I guess the reason why it's not a possibility is not because of your side of the story, it's the translator side. Imagine that we saw 3 different options. There's actually languages with up to 5 different cases and 5 different cases. And then we have 5 here and 5 there and 5 in one more. That means 5 to the power of 3 different combinations that needs to be translated. Yeah, that would be super annoying for the translator. So it's simply not. But usually you do not have these set up in your applications anyway. You would have a number of balloons or whatever and then your user interface wouldn't look with strings like this. And otherwise, just stay away from Nina and her 99 balloons flying around, and you'll be just fine. How would I solve it, you say? Well, I would need to do this from C++. I would need in C++ to test whether I had 1 day or 3 days or 1 day or whatever, and then have 2 different strings for my translator to translate and then %n for the balloons. Yes, it would be annoying. It would be doable. it is not the end of the world. As I said, it's not like this is everyday thing, but it's just I gave you a warning when we started this whole section on internationalization, saying, careful, it's difficult. Remember the story of the exclamation mark. Here is another one. It is not super trivial. You need to have a good communication with your translators who will come back to you and say, I don't understand what you're trying to say here, or I can't possibly, from these strings that you have here, make up a good translation. Please do fix. And that's it for this episode. I'm Jesper Petersen from KDAB. I hope you enjoy this series, and if you do, please do give me a thumb up, do subscribe, and all of those things. Until next time, have a great time.